these changes for Reyna are great. These changes for me and my mental and solo queue all around are dog.
A little bit less than like $500,000 to get me from Ambox over to like Envy. It was extremely massive buyout.
They've said that they can't be in the partnership program. I'm not really sure what else there is on top of that they can do.
When you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And I think that's what Carlos is doing.
Let's start with the spice right away. The first one is actually to talk about Ye already with the future of what happens to Ye, what happens to Optic, where do we think he's going to go? He's actually had recently a conversation with Richard Lewis, which I did as well. You guys can check it out with Richard Lewis's YouTube. And of course, I'm going to get grilled by production saying that I didn't give a shout out to Valoranting. So my apologies for that. But let's see at least what Ye had to say to Richard Lewis in terms of buyouts, right? Of where he could land up next. So let's check that out.
It does sound pretty final then. I guess you guys are bracing for the worst and expecting to be in other teams.
I mean, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest possibility, but yeah, it's hard to say at this very moment. You know, it really is. It's just some teams, at least in the league right now, for example, aren't even like willing to pay for buyouts. You know, like that. Basically, it's just like, no, sorry, we don't want to pay any buyouts, but you know, you can join us, but we're not going to be able to do that. You know, so it's just like.
Well, what's the initial thought here, Tanner, of trying to think of these buyout situations for a lot of these players when you're in literally the window's opening today for organizations to be able to sign one of these free agents or restricted free agents to their orgs?
Yeah, it sounds like we're going to have one hell of an Ascension League. That's what it sounds like. These players. It does seem really strange. I'm wondering if that's just like obviously first year things. You want to make sure that you're not spending too much money because ideally, these players are still going to be available at the end of this year if nobody's wanting to pay out these buyouts. And it definitely sucks that, oh man, I don't even want to say it, right? That there's a world where Ye doesn't end up on a team because his buyout is too large and, you know, teams aren't trying to go too far in the dumpster in their first year, you know, building this roster. It's also hard because we only have 5 like North American teams. I would assume that the teams coming over from Brazil and the Latin Americas probably want to stay with some of those players and some of that culture. They're not necessarily looking to pick up like strict NA or strict I guess NA, you know, Canada, US players right away. So it's an interesting spot to think that, you know, maybe Ye doesn't find a home and he just is running amok with Ye and friends.
I do want to jump in there though, because I watched this entire interview last night, and Ye did say in that interview that he's had quite a lot of offers, and also including he's had like a massive offer for a ridiculous amount of money from like an APAC team. And he's not interested in going there. He is open to EMEA and the Americas League, but he's had a number of offers. So I don't think we need to worry about Ye not ending up in the actual league itself. But I think the idea of the Optic players not all being on the same team is a very real possibility. And that was something that they really discussed in this interview and that was kind of the context of this clip, was Richard basically said, you know, is there any chance that they would sort of forego the cost of the buyout to allow the 5 of you to stay together? And Ye was like, they paid all this money for me. I don't think they're ever gonna just allow us to go for free.
Yeah.
You know,
and on that note, even we have to see even what that buyout is, because this next thought actually says what that buyout is about. So let's see what he has to say.
To give like a little bit of context, you know, they spent like a whole bunch of money, for example, on my buyout. Like I forget the exact number. It was something, you know, maybe a little bit less than like $500,000 to get me from like Ambox over to like Envy. It was extremely massive buyout. So it's like a situation in which like I think from their perspective, you know, they do want to at least get like somewhat of like a return, you know, because like now that you've been not even like knocked out of the partnership league, you don't have like anything. Now you're just kind of like you're kind of just stuck in like a weird situation. So
and that's the thing. It was 500,000 for back then when people maybe didn't even know about Ye yet, right? They knew a little bit about Ye, but he was like playing Breach on Split. Nobody knew that Ye actually played another agent than Jet or Chamber until you actually wanted to watch more of Ye when he started popping off in Envy and now Optic. So if his buyout was 500,000 in his Endbox days. What is his buyout now? Now that Envy or Optic now consistently have been in the top 3 at international events, and not only Yay, but now what's the cost of FNS? What's the cost of Crashies? What's the cost of Victor if those guys are actually RFAs as well, right? So that comes to be a very, 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 very expensive roster if you actually want to stick together. So my thoughts back to you here, starting with you, Gio. Would it make sense, though, as an investment, now that you're part of the partnership program, right? You are guaranteed at least a minimum of years to still have representation, to still have, I guess, imprint and a fan base around your organizations. Would this be a good investment if the whole roster was, let's say, like 2 million, 3 million at this point?
I mean, it's an interesting thing because you have to consider that. Okay, let's just look at the 5 North American teams, right? It's like these 5 teams already have their own established rosters. I highly doubt that they will all be looking to completely ditch the rosters they have. They might want to ditch some of the players and build around certain others, certain cores in their roster. But I think the likelihood of them getting rid of everybody just to bring on 6 men, if you include Chet in this as well, just to bring on 6 men that are already established, I actually think that's pretty unlikely. And especially when you consider just how expensive that is, whereas it may be cheaper for them to be like, okay, well, here is something that we have missing, or here's something we would like to build around in our roster that includes other players that we may already have. So let's pick from the bunch, right? Like we might need a really good IGL. So let's take FNS, or like we might need like a really good Oppa. So let's take Yay from that. But I don't know if like it's going to be considered a worthwhile investment for a lot of these teams to just buy it as a holistic entity.
And I think that's that same kind of scare of are people actually going to pay buyouts and pay this big money for all 5 players is something in the back of the players' minds, where you see in that graphic, Crashies and Victor are unrestricted free agents. They basically have that freedom to just walk and not gamble the full 5 being picked up at X cost. So I think
what's UFA,
it's
Tanner? Just to let people in the chat know, UFA versus RFA here.
UFA, unrestricted free agent, meaning that they're not tied to Optic anymore with a contract. Whereas restricted free agent, there's going to be a buyout involved to break the contract and then have the player. So with Victor and Crashies, they have freedom to just kind of go wherever they want. I would imagine a team like Evil Geniuses, maybe NRG, are looking to pick those 2 up because I'm pretty sure they're a package deal. So yeah, I don't think the Optic roster stays together, and I don't think the possibility, because of what we just saw there, of all 5 going together, I think it's a whole lot smaller, because you got to look out for yourself sometimes. In the case of Crashies and Victor.
I just want to add on to there as well. I think that the org that would be the most likely willing to spend that kind of money would be 100 Thieves, but 100 Thieves have a lot of things as part of their roster that they're probably not going to want to get rid of. Like, are they going to want to replace Sean and DDK to bring in a different coach? Like, they could add Chet on, in theory, yes, but they've also spent a lot of money on like their roster. And yes, their roster didn't get as far in, in champs as they would have liked. And so maybe that's something that Nature would be considering like upgrading on. But I think that there are parts of their system that they have in place that they're going to want to maintain, and I see them as being the org that would have been the most likely willing to spend the kind of money needed to buy out all 6 members of Optic.
Well, we'll have an opportunity to actually dive deeper into this topic once we have actually Juvenile and Anders coming on later to talk about the North American speculations around the rosters. But at least some real changes that have been confirmed or around the maps are about to come out, or I guess get a little bit of a tweak, and that's on Fracture and on Pearl. And to start things off with Pearl, there wasn't really any type of like big changes, Tanner, where we're like, oh, the B side needs to blow up because it's fucking boring to watch a hit into the B side. But maybe some small changes into this map may allow for you to get a little bit more splits into this B side, including mostly like these headshot angles and the 50-50 corners that are changing more around the mid and towards the B halls area for the site. What do you think about the Pearl changes?
So I think most importantly, we saw at Champions, right, how important it was to get mid control. And now I definitely think that helps. So maybe these changes around, that mid spawn, that mid window area, the like the boxes going into art, those kind of indirectly affect how you can take the B site, because you're less afraid of somebody jumping up on a box and level changing, swinging you from art as you're pushing out through mid. And you can get through that B link now that we have that new box there. So I think indirectly it helped the B site, but it just feels kind of quality, right? It just feels the map is so big and already kind of ratty that Riot had to go in there and take out the extra rat stuff, right? You see like every corner that you could hide in, you can no longer hide in. So I definitely think more changes need to be made, but this is definitely a good step. And obviously, you know, we have to see teams actually hitting this one hard to find out if just changing these corners is going to be enough.
I think those changes too towards the doors and the B halls also is like, hey, let's try to have a little bit, allow more mid control maybe on the attack or something like that too. Because if we've been watching Champions and we've been watching NA's dominance on that map, it was a lot about the teams just playing a lot more on these extremities and going for like these heavy sight hits on like maybe like a 4-1 maximum or a super late lurk towards mid. So hopefully we're going to see something different on there. But at least other changes that we've seen, as I mentioned before, is Fracture. And Geo, it seems Fracture right now, it's mostly an overhaul around the A site, mainly towards Sands, towards the rope, and also towards Dish. What are your thoughts as to why you think we see these changes here into the A side of Fracture?
I actually quite like this little what do you even call it, like the rafters thing that we just saw it go past, because I think that it means that if you're playing in that kind of area of the spawn, then you have more control over where you can choose to move. Like you don't just have to be sitting looking at like the hall or whatever. You can move towards the site. The changes around Dish as well are pretty huge because they take away an option essentially. And if you want to be doing something like guarding an orb or looking out for players who might be going for the orb, then you are kind of less conflicted in what direction you want to be facing your attentions and things like that. And I think that on a really big map like this, changes like that are actually pretty important in terms of how much time it can cut off, how much utility it can cut off, and the fact that, you know, small decisions are maybe going to have a slightly different and maybe lesser impact because they're not kind of based on RNG, if that makes sense, right? It's like, oh, did they turn left or did they turn right? Well, one of those decisions can be the one that makes you win, and one of those decisions can be the one that makes you lose.
Yeah. And sometimes when it comes down to not checking left or right, but you're going head to head in a short range, there's some changes that happened in the game recently that and we actually saw the changes on Champions before, and now it's even better. The Stinger. Are we going to have a Stinger meta once again, Tanner? I just saw you close your eyes and shake your head before we went into a transition. So let me know your fucking thoughts.
Dude, the Stinger right now is fucking terrifying. Like, if your first 3 bullets can all be headshots if you're just standing still. So like somebody, not me, who's perfect at counter strafing and can just shoot somebody in the head. Dude, it's a nightmare right now. Solo queue's about to get awful. And before this even happened, I think Slow put out an article talking about how if you have some players saving in the, look at this thing, man. It's insane. Like, it's a baby Vandal. Obviously, it doesn't do the same damage, but when I was just spraying like this as well, it's not all over the place. You eventually get to a pretty good settled point where you can just spray. Was it 25 rounds? The Stinger's not okay. But what I think is scary is that people's minds are starting to think about maybe not necessarily conceding the pistol round, but having people full save on the pistol round so you can be stinger by and forcing up really heavily in your second round. I think the economy really changes once the pros get their hands on this Stinger. It's a fucking problem, man.
That's interesting. An interesting thought, actually, if it comes down to, hey, let's full save a pistol round, because that's actually going to be very, how do I put this? Very difficult, I guess, if you're going to play defense, at least to start things off, unless you want to go like an FPX style. But we'll meta that once we get to that point. I know Anders is in the chat. He could probably think about something in terms of the economy later on. But let's go into something that's literally more solidified in terms of results. It's also what's going on with the game changers in EMEA for season 3. So far, it seems there's no surprises, right, Gio? Guildex, G2 goes in, to just continue to dominate, to just continue to move forward. But if you're actually looking at this bracket, from G2 goes in versus Kaze, or if you're looking at all the teams that have made it through their top 16, if I'm not mistaken here, if I'm counting correctly, it's to no surprise, but also it looks like we're going to have some good competition off the rip in the upper round 1.
Yeah, there's a lot of big names that have obviously made it through. The part of the bracket that catches my eye, because I casted some of the qualifiers for this Game Changers last week, and we were following 10 Star Nova, and they came up against Rebels Velvet, right? And they got upset in that game. But both of them have a chance of facing each other in the upper bracket quarterfinals. If you have a look, if Rebels Velvet beat Fireflux Fierce and 10 Star beat Alliance Coven. So I would be very interested to see if those two come up, just because that was the story that I was following when casting it. I think the really exciting thing about Game Changers, though, at this point is that if you go back a couple like Game Changers ago, it's like there may be like 2 or 3 teams whose names really mean anything in the Game Changer scene, who have like kind of stood out. Meanwhile, we can look at that upper bracket so far and be like, oh, actually, yeah, you know, that team and that team and that team and that team also like, you know, like we're starting to really get a solid idea of what this scene looks like and the stories that permeate through it, which I think is quite cool.
And for you here, Tanner, because, you know, we follow a little bit less into EMEA, and then once we want to try to follow into the EMEA, you always think about, okay, who are the bigger teams? It's like that G2 and the Guild X. But is there anybody else that could actually topple them this time?
So I don't think there's anybody that beats them, unfortunately. I think that Alliance Coven team looks pretty strong, and Ascend Rising as well. Those are kind of my 3-4 for EMEA Game Changers. I think G2 just looks so good. Guild has obviously been right on their heels. It is exciting to see. Well, I guess I wouldn't maybe say it's much closer, but it is exciting to see that Guild has been leveling up and meeting in these finals over and over and over again. They do look better every time they play G2 Gozen, but it's the same thing that we've got going on here in NA, where Cloud9 White, and it's usually Shopify. Now it's been Evil Geniuses. You know, teams, when you're at the top, you're the champion forever. You prep for everybody, and everybody is prepping for you. So it does get hard to stay at the top. It is nice to see that G2 and Cloud9 White have been able to do that. Outside of this, though, I do want to give a shout to Team Liquid Brazil. Their Game Changers team is on a 40-game win streak in Game Changers tournaments. So that's another one that we really, it gets so much more exciting knowing that we're a month and a couple of days away from the international tournament and finally seeing it all collide, because obviously reigning supreme in NA is something that these teams, Cloud9, G2 Gozen, Team Liquid Brazil, have been doing. And we're about to see them clash, man. So I think that's awesome. Super cool in itself.
That's Game Landers purple, right? Previously, when it's Team Liquid right now, if I'm not mistaken. If that's the case, I could be wrong, but it could be it as well.
The Game Landers purple team is in there. The Game Landers purple team is like the notable second place. They just lost a 5-game series to Team Liquid Brazil.
So that's pretty insane, though, to look about how things are going on into like the VCT season. Like before, when the game first came out, you're always like, TSM is going to be at the top. No, it's going to be Sentinels. And then on the other end, it's like, oh, no, it's Team Liquid or it's G2. And then you had actually almost like before it was loud, that was going to be like, okay, what's going to happen once we get into the international stage? And I'm looking forward to see that for the Game Changers, at least in November. But, you know, I want to go on a small tangent right now. I had it because we were just looking at these clips of G2 playing, and I'm just looking at the ADS, and I had a dream yesterday playing Valorant. And somehow I was ADSing, and my there's like little, you know, like the little dots around the history when you hit the scoreboard and you see the round histories. It was on the right of my crosshair, and then I was shooting everything outside of those 2 dots, so I was whiffing all my shots. But I guess that doesn't change into really anything about me playing Valorant today anyways. But with that said, I want to give a quick shout out to you.
Sharing, Vance.
I don't know, man. I said I had to go on a tangent. I had to go on a tangent. Shout out to Juke.gg, actually, for helping us out here and giving us a little bit of more of a platform to actually do some advertisement about our show Valoranting on Juke.gg. Make sure you guys check them out. It's actually going to be a platform, toxic-free environment for you to talk about your favorite games and all the esports that you follow. So big shout out to Ben and everybody over there. But let's go into one of the edgier segments that's been around the conversation for the past week and a half now. It started off with, unfortunately, G2 not being able to be a part of the partnership program, which we talked about last week. If you guys missed the show, you can always go last week and check it out as well on twitch.tv/DNPeak or on Valoranting on YouTube. But that said, now, what's new going into this week is unfortunately seeing that Carlos has been forced to step down out of G2 and maybe even at this point, being recommended to sell all of his shares to eliminate all of his hands-on involvement
Association?
within the G2 organization. Exactly, association. Thank you. So let's actually see what happens over here. I mean, we see a couple of clips going on right now of what was happening with G2 losing the partnership. It was basically G2 had a North American spot. They were supposed to pick up the full XSET roster with no changes. There've been a few people in the works in terms of potentially being a coach. As you saw, Kaplan in one of the excerpts here was interviewing to be a coach, and unfortunately, all of that falls through. But let's also see what Carlos has to say when he was now stepping down of G2.
I am very grateful for all these years together, you know. I take full responsibility over everything that went on in the last few days. And again, trust me when I say, I just feel fucking destroyed about it. You should know that. What's next for G2? I mean, I created G2 8+ years ago, and I bootstrapped it with what I earned as a player, invested everything into it, not only money, but also time. And, you know, what initially was a dream of mine just started here, eventually became a group of people with similar ambitions and culture and goals, you know, and that's something that I will always look back to and be happy about, because I think we've done.
Of course, it goes on longer than that, but the main gist of it is there. He's stepping down of G2, no longer part of the organization as a CEO. I think there's two parts in this, and I'm going to treat this like me being the type of person that has no idea what the fuck is going on. So let's revisit at least the G2 and missing the North American partnership spot for Riot's partnership program, because apparently it was also, if I'm not mistaken, until even like back then until June, they knew that they were going to get a partnership spot, and then only a week and a half ago losing that position because of you know, everything that's happened on social media, as everybody's seen. I don't want to mention any names because I don't want to give this person more marketing for better or for worse for this fucking guy. So that said, and that guy not being Carlos, I meant the other guy.
Yeah.
That said, though, G2's not part of this anymore. And then XSET was supposed to be the roster that was signed up. Do we think, Gio, at this point now that we've done a good job from Riot's perspective to actually separate our ties with G2 into the partnership program?
I mean, yeah, sure. Like, they've said that they can't be in the partnership program. I'm not really sure what else there is on top of that they can do. I think that if G2 also, if they retain like an Ascension roster and they do qualify, then by that time it's fine, because the issue that lost them their spot isn't really like a pertinent issue anymore. I think that if it's a long term, like, we're just going to keep taking it away from them, that would be a little bit unfair. But I think that there's a lot of focus from people, especially in the community, on like, this is them trying to like punish G2. It's like, it's not, it's a business decision, you know? It's like, it's terrible optics. It's terrible optics, especially if like and this is just assumption, but like, we're assuming that part of the plans of these partnership teams that actually got into the partnership program has to include things like GameChangers, investment and stuff like that, right? It's like, it's gonna look awful from a business perspective. It is purely a PR thing. And ultimately, like, G2 have gotten rid of their CEO, presumably because like their directors have voted him off, as he has lost them millions of dollars. You know, like, that business side of things has kind of been taken care of, and that's sort of that, you know? Like, I don't see it much further beyond that.
Yeah, exactly that. I feel that within a business perspective, and you're representing G2 at this point, that thing happens, then yes, you're cutting ties out of the partnership program between G2 and also between Riot. It makes sense, especially when you're trying to move the world into a better direction, right? When everything that has been going on throughout the Riot's you know, allegation around the in-office sexual harassments and all that stuff, you also have to make sure that whatever you're trying to represent, like that team within Riot that's working on esports, that's working on the VCT partnership program, probably has nothing to do with all these allegations that are happening within the office, but you still want to move the the scene and the world in a better place. So it
Yeah.
kind of makes sense that you can't really associate yourself with somebody who unfortunately associated himself in a Twitter video with this person. But on the other end, for Carlos as a person, Tanner, I want to ask you, has the community, have we pitchforked him a little bit too far? Because if you think about Carlos overall, yes, it was a bad tweet. Yes, he's hanging out with the worst people. But at the same time, has he been accused of anything himself that should actually fortify a reasoning for him to actually drop everything as a whole?
Yeah, so I think when you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And I think that's what Carlos is doing, especially like at that stature, knowing who you are, the presence that you have, even if it's kind of like a one-off thing, people just show up to the party and they're just there. You have to be vigilant when you do have such a presence like Carlos does, as G2 is one of, if not the, the largest org in esports just in general. So I think that was a huge oversight for him to allow something like that to happen. I think for Carlos, it's okay, obviously, to be sad. That sucks, but he's not getting canceled. People are probably still going to support Carlos. Carlos didn't get canceled. He just got fired. Like, that's all it is at the end of the day, right? Business deal. Yeah. It's not good. I'm sad that we're kind of seeing all this stuff happen rapid fire, and it was last second that G2 doesn't get into the partnership program. I wish we could have had, because again, just who G2 is in general and what they were looking to do, signing X said, maybe Kaplan gets a job. We obviously love Cap. I wish there was a step in between where we could have, Riot could have gone to G2 and said, hey, we'll still allow this, this spot for G2, but you do have to cut ties with Carlos. I wish we did that before cutting ties with Carlos. That would have allowed this to happen. Obviously, I think Leviathan was the final team that ended up getting the spot there. So, good on them for doing it. It just sucks for the players around here in NA, obviously.
But then,
I'm biased.
what happens then? Okay, let's assume that happened. But what happens when that gets leaked and now suddenly the bad press is on Riot because Riot are trying to strong arm G2 into firing their CEO? Like that, none of these options will look good on Riot. Like Riot didn't really have much of a choice. They had to be like, okay, well, you just can't be part of our program. Because if they say, okay, you can be part of our program, but here is like what that's predicated on, like then the bad press is on Riot. Because you can say, like, oh, but they sign like NDAs and shit. Like, no, of course it's gonna get fucking leaked, And I think that like there really would have been no winning option for Riot if they hadn't have done it the way that they had done it. And ultimately, like, I feel super bad for all the people at G2 who've worked really hard on, I know some people at other orgs who were responsible for working on their application for their respective orgs partnerships, and seeing like how stressed they were and how much work they put into it. Like I can tell how much work has gone into it from the people in G2, and I feel awful for them and all of like these players, coaches, whoever the fuck was involved in like the talks for the future of G2's presence in Valorant. I feel awful for all of those people. But yeah, like it really is on Carlos. And like this is the thing that I found so like wild about this is that, kind of a CEO being who kind of represents the face of the company being voted out of his role because of a PR fuck up that is on him. That's very normal. But when it was Blizzard not firing Bobby Kotick, people were very angry that the directors wouldn't vote Bobby Kotick out when he was doing, like kind of heinous shit as a CEO as well. And so I find it really interesting that in the last like year or so, we've had two instances where like a CEO in the esports/gaming space has been caught in some kind of scandal. And we've got on the one end, the CEO not getting voted out and people being mad about it. And on the other end, the CEO getting voted out and people being mad about it. Like what? But I really do think that there's no other way that it could have been handled. And really the fault just lies on Carlos's shoulders for doing it when he did it. I don't even think it would have been that bad if Carlos had posted the video and that was kind of that. It was the doubling down. Then it was all of the likes that he did after releasing the PR statement. It was the fact that he so strongly and so publicly stood by something which was never going to get a positive public reception. I think if he'd have just posted the video and then never acknowledged it again, that kind of probably would have just been that.
Yeah. And I guess to put it also in like just layman business ways, like me being the fucking idiot again, but I've worked in a corporation, but like if I was strong into my opinion, it's just like, no, we actually have to run our campaign this way, and it actually cost my company millions of dollars. I eventually would probably get fired from my job too for not doing a good job. So I think it kind of has to stem down to the business aspect of it, that it wasn't a good PR stunt, as you mentioned, Gio, of what was done from Carlos' perspective. So that's going to happen. And I think at this point, with Riot saying we don't want to be associated with G2, if Carlos is still part of the G2, then in a sense, G2 could still play the Ascension program now that Carlos has stepped down. But the bigger pie the bigger piece of the pie has been lost, because you're not guaranteed to stay long-term within the partnership program, right? You win Ascension program, you get promoted into the VCTs or the partnership program. That's only going to be for 2 years, and then you're going back down, and you're just going to have to rework your way up. So in that sense, in the long term, is that going to be a good business investment for an organization in G2 in the long run? That's also could be going into the $1 million that they could lose by just going back and forth, up and down in this partnership program, or not, until we figure out what's going to how the system's going to evolve in the next few years with the VCTs. But Tanner, any final words you want to say about this topic?
Yeah, I can't let this die. Riot already kind of strong-armed G2 into getting rid. Like, there's tweets out there said Riot forced, then another tweet. I think we have, Ian, I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
That was a bit of a mistranslation as what was mentioned here.
So,
exactly.
According to Esport Maniacos, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, need capital letters if we're going to like space out words and stuff. Riot has blacklisted Carlos and forced him to sell his shares. And then we see Tim Rizzo here saying, Riot can say, hey, we'll keep working with you going forward, but Carlos can't have any share in the company. But they can't say, you have to fire him or you're fucked, right? Riot can't obviously do that. So the point that I was making is, because this happened, I would have liked to have seen this happen before G2 ultimately just gets shafted from their spot in general. That's what I was saying, Gio, when we were kind of going back and forth, is that Riot already did all of this stuff. If it's going to look bad on Riot for forcing him out, it should now look bad on Riot because they did force him out. And G2 are also out of a spot. So they're out of a CEO, which is kind of a plus because of who the CEO is. And they're out of a spot too, which that just sucks ass. Again, obviously for Leviathan, you're counting your blessings there, but G2 just means a lot in esports.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we had some changes now going into the partnership program that we'll finally see who are rosters that are going to be, forming these organizations in the next couple of weeks. But as changes are happening outside the game, there's potential more changes happening inside the game, and that is going to be around agents, mainly around duelists and initiators, where it feels like within the PBE in North America, we're testing out a few things, more specifically on Sky, KO, Reyna, and Yoru. And I feel that what they're trying to do in this balance change is to actually not try to show any overpowerment of the initiators, such as KO or such as Sky, to take over the actual duelists that are supposed to be duelists, right? Because a lot of players are using KO, Sky, and even to some extent Chamber as the entry role as a duelist, as the one that's going to get the most kills for the team. And then you're seeing a huge drop in terms of like Reyna and Yoru. So we'll have a chance to talk about these bit by bit. I want to start things off with talking about Reyna. And Reyna, apparently the biggest changes is around her flash. That's going to be more global, I guess, in a sense that, if you were too far back, there wasn't going to be any type of you weren't going to be penalized by any flashes, but now there's an infinite range on the Leer. I want to know your thoughts now on the changes of Reyna now, Tanner. Is this going to be now Reyna making a comeback, or what's your expectation here?
Yeah, I'm pissed off, Vance. I'm pissed off, all right? If the Stinger wasn't enough, when you look at these changes, so this right here is KO's re-equip time, but when you look at this Leer here, not only does it have more range, not only is it infinite blind, which for competitive play, I'll let you guys talk about that. I'm talking about solo queue and what this just did to the demons that insta-lock Reyna. It's about to be worse. We're going to have people insta-locking Reyna and then people dodging because they couldn't insta-lock Reyna. It's not just going to be jumping over to the Jet next. This sucks. And for the
Is it
Reynas
that bad, though?
Dude, it's so not only is it that bad, I don't know if we can run that back. Look how fast she pulls out her what? Dude, that's not real life. That she literally tosses the Leer and she's like octane stemmed, gun still in hand, shooting people as the Leer is going out. Like, that is actually awful, dude. And it's going to be, dude, the OP paradox, man. Playing League of Legends, when there's a Yasuo on the enemy team, they're going 24-3 and they're beating the shit out of everybody. When they're on your team, it's bad. And that's how it is. Reyna's on my team. They lurk and they go 9-17. I'm right behind them, 8-21, sure. But the enemy team Reyna is now even more of a problem. So for solo queue,
here's my argument,
I'm
though.
pissed off.
Here's my argument. Reyna's Leer could actually get broken, and it could actually get broken quite quick. So I think the nice little change that you have from like an infinite Leer distance that you have on Reyna versus her pullout time of the weapon means that at least her Leer may not potentially blind everybody within the site if you actually have somebody that's going to be shooting a Leer. But secondly, the point of the Leer, you could have a little bit more autonomy as a Reyna to be like, you know, quote unquote, a fake flash. You're breaking the crosshair placement by throwing your Leer, and you can come out and swing to get the shot once you want to take your 1-versus-1 duel. And I think that's actually pretty good for her in that sense. But okay, go ahead, Tanner. You got something to say.
I'm not disagreeing. Yeah. These changes for Reyna are great. These changes for me and my mental and solo queue all around are dog shit. Again,
Tanner,
the Reyna insta
Tanner, you're fucking Diamond 3. Learn how to shoot a fucking eye. Let's talk about
Dude,
KO.
It's more than that, man.
KO's coming up next year. We got
it when mommy and daddy fight.
Welcome to our show now with Daddy Silly being the one hosting. So, yeah, let's talk about KO at this point. We've had some changes as well in terms of the right-click flash, right? So the duration of the flash is actually a lot lower now at this point too. And now, you know, there's some nerfs, I guess, in the end of his flashes. And pulling out the weapon is going to be a little bit slower, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm reading that third line correctly. So, Gio, your thoughts now on KO? Is this going to change the fact that you're going to have less KO, or the rest of his kits, for example, the 0.0 command and the fragments will still be good enough for KO to be a must-pick pretty much into the initiators in the upcoming patches?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that the rest of KO's kit still makes him pretty valuable. You know, the fact that he has a very versatile kit is what, and also let's not forget that the reason KO was even put into the game in the first place was to almost mimic the kind of style of play that you have in CS, which is a game that doesn't have roles, right? It doesn't have inbuilt roles. So the whole argument from Riot has been that we don't want initiators to be basically overtaking the need to play duelists. But KO is kind of built to be a hybrid of the two because of what he was based off of. But I do find the whole thing very interesting. And this is maybe not just about KO, because I think it's also relevant to the Reyna thing before, and perhaps more so to the Reyna thing because she's been in the game since the beginning. But as more agents get brought into the game and there is a lot more complexity and variety in what abilities are present in the game, then it's not gonna, you know, those earlier agents are not going to be quite as simple. Where like with Reyna, when she was introduced into the game, i.e. from the beginning, there was more of a need for a duelist to carry a flash because we didn't really have those options on the initiators. But like, that's just not the case anymore because we've had more initiators put into the game. And so where that utility is shared amongst the team and across the roles has changed. And I think that's something that isn't going to change. Like, that's always going to be the way that it further and further goes that way in Valorant. So no, I don't think that KO is going to suddenly become useless or anything, but I don't think that it's sustainable to keep trying to make changes. It's just going to be better to kind of go with the way that the game is just going to evolve naturally.
Yeah, and at least if then the knife's still fucked. So there's conversations between Raikou over at Riot and Strong Legs and Nismo that we're talking about, like the bug, trying to figure out how we could actually get the best value out of the 0 point now. But let's switch on over. Let's switch the gears and talk about Skye. Cool changes actually on Skye. I think the most important that I like to read right now, or I'll read all three. The flash has changed once again. Basically, that's going to be longer to cast it out, if I'm not mistaken. No, the max flash duration now goes from 125 to 225, so it's actually even longer. And but the bird can no longer be shot or destroyed. That's what I'm interested about. Is going to be some cool changes going to Sky, because now you're going to add another layer of fake flashes in my eyes, with no pun intended. With Sky going on at this point, I also think about the mechanic of throwing
Stage
a
3
flash.
2021 is back.
Exactly. And on top of that, when you could actually throw a bird out in your face at headshot level, so you actually don't get shot in the head, that could actually become like a slow shield, so that you could like a shield in front of you, an obstacle, so you could actually win duels against others. I think that's actually a cool little balance. What are your thoughts here, Tanner?
Yeah, so I think the coolest thing about this is it kind of forces initiators to be initiators, not like solo sufficient or self-sufficient duelists or just agents in general. The way that the Sky Flash, now the bar has kind of like a Sova bar, but it has one line where if you pop it early to flash for yourself, it only lasts for 0.75 seconds. If you go past the bar, that's when you're going to get that full flash, the 2.25 seconds. And I think it's like a nerf to Sky playing for herself, right? Because if you toss out a bird, it's no longer acting like how the Reyna Lear would work, where people want to try and shoot that. Now people can just completely disregard that. And if you don't completely disregard it and it pops right in your face, it's less than a second now, and the Sky is going to have a harder time swinging off of that. So I like that the self-sufficiency from the Sky is kind of going out the window, and we're getting towards just a heavier team play game where the Sky is going to have to hang out for a bit. That Sky is going to be have to be with the team to get the most out of the potential from the kit to full flash and actually initiate for the teams, rather than just pop flashing through a Viper wall and killing 3 people yourself. So
Yeah.
I think it's cool for the game itself. For Sky players, they maybe feel a different way about it.
Last but not least, Yoru. Are we actually going to see more Yoru changes outside of an XPX Troll Icebox pick? Yoru flash duration increased from 1.5 to 1.75. Actually, I've been playing against more and more Yoru in my ranked games, and I'm still a noob that I can't turn away from flashes. Whenever they're running their teleportation flashes plays, it's actually it hurts, man, if you're not expecting and if you're not used to playing against a Yoru. Let's see what else they have. Visual in third person for flash players render behind the person's head once it starts to fade. And then the window increase for rewarding assist from 1 to 3 seconds. Okay, more assists. I don't give a fuck. What are you going to say, Tanner?
This is so weird that I didn't know that this was just for Yoru, but when somebody is flashed, they have like the golden glow all over their face. And then once the flash starts to subside, you see the golden glow move to their head, and you can see the character face again. So like, before you were like, what the hell? They were flashed. How did they kill me? Now you know, okay,
if you see their face, they can see you. Yeah.
But that's only for Yoru flashes? Like, why wouldn't that? Like, that still seems like such a good quality of life for all flashes, to know that once I start seeing their face, they see me too. So that just seems weird that that's only for Yoru.
Because if you want a quality of life, the idea is that you have to play Yoru. I think that's the idea here. You have to understand.
Exactly.
Trade-off.
But if not, I think there was also another example of showing how like the paranoias and the Reyna Lears kind of work too. Is that if you're in the range, because the paranoia only puts you nearsighted, right? It doesn't fully blind you. So if you're seeing the dark cloud in front of their faces, they can't see you. But if you start seeing their face a little bit, that means they could see you and they could shoot back. So that's a little cool quality of life if you guys didn't know that within your ranked games. But we'll have to see how that's going to change. I mean, who knows? Is this officially going to go into the patch changes, because it's only in the NA PBE, but also to that extent, everything that's been a PBE has always come out at the same time. So that said, I'm looking forward to see the changes for those and to see if it's going to happen and how that's going to change the game. Maybe get more duelists, more dueling out of our duelists. Now let's go into a little bit of community news to see what's going on around the world in third-party tournaments. We actually have a Superdome tournament coming up very soon that's going to be announced here. I think it's going to be with the MENA people, if I'm not mistaken, supported by Riot. This is going to be an event taking place in Cairo. So make sure you bring your linen shirts and whatnot going to compete out there and going to work out there. But this is actually a pretty cool way to start things off here off the off season, right? Because everybody has been talking about what the fuck is going on in NA and EMEA, or just what is going to happen after the VCTs. Because yes, everybody's talking about the roster changes, but also people want to play and people want to make money and people also want to watch some Valorant tournaments too. And I think seeing like the soft locks of the rosters coming up is going to be quite nice to see them actually perform during these off-season tournaments, right? I think that's going to be pretty cool there. Another cool little event that's happening at the same time too is with G-Loot. Or unless you're a person that works out, you can call them glute. That is going to be a tournament that's going to be a Clash tournament happening quite soon as well. This is going to be a $50,000 tournament that's going to be in the EMEA. So there you go. When I was talking about, hey, what's happening in NA? What's happening in EMEA? Well, now you have it as well. The G-Loot Brawl, which allows teams to qualify based on their in-game stats tracked from the G-Loot app. That's actually quite interesting. We had a conversation about this before we went live in our quote-unquote green room, Geo, and you were saying that G-Loot were kind of like known as well for like PUBG tournaments that they run. Is this in like a similar fashion? I don't know if you followed it in the same aspect or that deeply to see if there's something
I'm
similar.
A huge PUBG fan. Can
That's
you
what
tell?
I thought. That's what I thought. So tell me all about it.
I'm assuming that it's kind of similar to like FPL with Face It, like where they have their own thing. I could be wrong, but that is my assumption. I mean, for me, regardless of what app it's being tracked through, I do find it interesting that your stats is going to be what kind of qualifies you, because
that's what I'm saying.
What does that mean? Like,
Yeah,
does that mean that we could have some real rank demons?
Yeah. Can we see the third or the fourth screenshot here, Daniel? Because I think it said something about like visiting the website gets you points or whatever.
Yep.
I guess it's whatever gets you engaged within the G-Loot application or the G-Loot website or the G-Loot activities will allow for you to get these points on these and also on the in-game stats when you're actually playing. So I'm assuming it's also like a tracker.gg or something like that as well, where your stats are going to come into play. But that's going to be a very interesting one. What do you think, Tanner?
Yeah, I think it is going to be like that. And same thing with Geo. That's my question, right? Is if somebody from X team is high on there, are they going to invite the whole team? Or are you you're going to have pro player next to solo queue Reyna God, who's also up there, right? You're just going to have random teams playing for $50,000. Very cool for the people that have never had the opportunity to compete. But for the people that are, taking it seriously, and this is actually their livelihood, it seems a little silly. There's probably another way that you could get clicks and accounts made on your website than to, for G-Loot to say, hey, you have to qualify this way. It's a little silly for $50,000.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that's going to pan out. I was only afraid after seeing this new thing because, again, I don't follow PUBG, so I thought it was going to be like Trovo Challenge. You know what the fuck happened to Trovo Challenge when it was like a new platform, people were getting paid in bits in the end, and it was probably going to be some like fucking money laundering scheme. So I hope it doesn't happen. With that, now it's time to get into the meats and potatoes, or if you're on a diet like me or trying to get to it, it's about your chickpeas and kale salad. So that is going to be to talk about the roster, rumors, restrictions, everything that's going around in North America and EMEA. That's going to be coming up after the break. But before that, of course, a big shout out to twitch.tv to help us out with the show. Let's go for that break. When we come back, Anders and Preston to come and hang out with us to talk about North America.